So, The Last of Us Season 2 is over. Now, this video is going to be posted probably like a week after the finale came out, but throughout the entire runtime of this season, every single episode has just gone by, and I have just been like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for I can't wait for a good episode to come along. Can't wait for a good episode to come along. Oh, this one just wasn't good. When is there going to be a good episode? Let's talk about The Last of Us Season 2. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on push notifications, but let's get into today's video. So, it's crazy to say, but The Last of Us Part 2 came out 5 years ago. Essentially 5 years ago. I think this November it'll be 5 years. And everyone hated The Last of Us Part 2. And what's crazy to me is that there are more defenders saying that The Last of Us Season 2 is good than there were people saying that The Last of Us Part 2 was good. And that is just absolutely mind-boggling. Now, granted, with this finale, this wasn't the entirety of The Last of Us Part 2, because Season 3 is going to be focusing on Abby's point of view, which I'm actually kind of excited for, because I think Abby's story is pretty interesting. A lot of people hated that we had to play for Abby for half the game, but I just thought, well, these are all characters. We need to really flesh out these characters before really making our decisions as to if we hate them or like them or not. So I like that part of The Last of Us Part 2. So I'm excited to see what they're going to do with Season 3. But after Season 2, I am skeptical. I have always been a defender of The Last of Us Part 2. I think it is one of the most beautiful and incredible games of all time. I think it's absolutely amazing. The gameplay, the story, I think The Last of Us Part 2 is a masterpiece. And I loved The Last of Us Season 1. I thought that they did a good job adapting the first game into a television show. They changed things, they switched things around, they added new things, and for the most part, I think everything was interesting, scary, emotional, and everything was done really well to adapt from the game to a show. But then The Last of Us Season 2 came out, and it was a season that I was very excited for, because I was like, there's so much possibility of what they can adapt from the game to the new show. And since the first episode of Season 2, it was just, okay, that was an episode. And then, episode 2 came along, and it's just like, oh, okay, episode 2, that was also an episode. And then it took 5 episodes to finally get to episode 6 to be like, oh, that was a great episode. So it took almost the entirety of the season to really get to a good episode, and then it was one of the last episodes, and it was great. One of the best episodes of the entire show. And then we got to the finale, and the finale was just as bad as the other episodes except for episode 6. For some reason, they decided to go ahead and make a ton of changes to Season 2. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because they, saw how many people hated The Last of Us Part 2 and were like, oh, we're not going to make that same mistake again, which is fine. They can make changes just like how Season 1 made changes, but they were tasteful changes. But no, instead of making tasteful changes and ones that, were actually good, they decided, no, we're going to throw in, different characters. We're going to throw in different character morals, the way that characters act. We're going to completely change Ellie. Like people are going to be so shocked how much we're going to change Ellie from the game to the show. They're going to love what we do to her character. That was the entirety of Season 2, and it got so tiring throughout every single episode. Now, I have been a Bella Ramsey defender. I mean, would there have been better choices to play Ellie? Yes. Would there have been better choices to play Joel? Yes. I think less of. I think Pedro Pascal is actually a great choice for Joel, and he's been absolutely killing it every single episode that he's been in. But Bella Ramsey, I've always been a defender. There have been people day one that just have hated her casting because of the way she looks, the way she acts, and I have never been like that. I've never been like, oh, she doesn't look like Ellie, so that's why her character's bad, or she's bad at acting as Ellie, that's why I don't like her character. I was never like that. And then Season 2 came along, and I'm still not, against her looks, but her acting just got so much worse. And she wasn't bad in Season 2. I think she was okay in the parts where, she was still acting like the Ellie in the first season, where she has this kid mentality. She's a very bratty person that's just annoyed with literally everyone, and Ellie in the game kind of had that attitude somewhat, but not to that extreme. She was kind of just secluded and just didn't really talk to people. And if someone upset her, then, you know, she would do something to let them know that she was upset by whatever they did. But in season 2, Ellie was just so annoying and bratty throughout the entire thing. And Bella Ramsey did a good job acting that. But then when it got to the serious parts, all of that brattiness and all of that childlike behavior completely undermined the serious nature of some of these scenes. Like the scene where Ellie is beating up on Nora to get information about Abby on where she is. It just felt so, like, almost laughable. Like, in the game, you could really tell that Ellie was just in pain and nothing was going to stop her from getting information that she needed. And you could really feel that how she basically blacked out. She probably didn't even know like what she was doing. She was just beating on her because that is the direction that she needed to go to find the people that killed Joel. But in the game, in the series, we go from her beating up on Nora, it being unserious, and then she goes back to the theater with Dina to get cleaned up. And this is the moment where we're really supposed to feel how Ellie didn't necessarily want to be doing that. She didn't like the feel of of beating on Nora. She didn't like that. And they did the same thing in the series than they did in the game. But in the game, you could actually feel how Ellie is just broken. Like, she was just like completely changed by that version of herself. In that moment, she started to really feel how Joel used to be, because Joel used to be this very brutal man, but then Ellie really changed that part of him, and ultimately is kind of what got him killed. Not saying that he put trust into Abby, because that's not really what that scene was in the game where he died. He didn't necessarily put trust into Abby. It was kind of just a, like, helping someone out, helping someone in danger out, and that's just what led him to die. But it's just been so disappointing every single episode of season 2, where Ellie was supposed to be feeling something that actually meant something, but then completely gets undermined by a sex scene between her and Dina, which should have happened earlier in the show, because in the game they do that when they're on patrol before Joel dies, and in the series they do it after he dies. So it's almost like so much disrespect onto Joel as a character. It feels like every episode that came after Joel dying, they just kept forgetting about what was important, what was the direction, why Ellie was so upset. Ellie was not upset. Ellie had forgotten about Joel. As far as I'm concerned, Ellie had just forgotten that Joel died. And that's what upset me the most, because in the game, no matter what point you were at in the game, you could tell Ellie was upset about something. And after Joel died, you could tell that Ellie had that direction. She wanted to go after the people that took the one thing that mattered to her away. Like, she wanted to get that revenge. But in the series, it was just sitting back on the couch, just waiting for Dina to do all the work. And even though in the game, Dina was also the one to point out, where they are on the map, it was so much different in the game than it was in the series. Ellie was just in the background doing, just saying witty jokes and just letting Dina do all the work, or just not taking things seriously, kind of poking fun at her for almost not doing a good enough job to find where they were. And it was just oh my gosh. There was a video I saw actually of someone putting a laugh track over some of the scenes in The Last of Us Season 2, and it's so funny because there are very awkward pauses in between jokes to almost give the audience enough time to really understand what the joke was, and they add a laugh track, and it really did sound like it was almost like a sitcom, and that kind of wrapped up the kind of comedy that the show was trying to do. And The Last of Us is not a comedy. There's barely any jokes in the game, especially The Last of Us Part 2. There may be some soft play, some soft humor every now and then, but nothing to really have the audience go oh, these characters are funny. That's not important. And Craig Mazin the main writer on season 2, who wrote every single episode, but co-wrote the 2 final episodes with Neil Druckmann, the original writer and creator of The Last of Us games. And Craig Mazin was the reason that I feel like this season was terrible. And I know Craig Mazin's a great writer. I know he wrote Chernobyl, and I know that he was also a main writer on the first season of The Last of Us. But for some reason, he decided that they needed all of these changes for season 2 to make it different and special. But it was everything but different and special. It was definitely different, but it definitely wasn't special. It was a disappointment. The Last of Us Season 2 is a really good example to how sometimes things just don't need to be changed. Like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I understand maybe adding a few changes here and there so that it's not an identical replication of the game. But honestly, at this point, with just how bad Season 2 was, I would have so much rather have seen a shot-for-shot remake of the game. Because, number one, it is a different media. Seeing it in live action is different, so it automatically would have been different, even if they have copied it like shot for shot from the game. I would have much rather have preferred that than all the crazy crap that they decided to change and add in the new season. Like, I've never been this... I won't say never, but it's rare for me to be this upset about something because I know just how much potential there actually was. But the Last of Us Season 2 really feels like there was so much creative difference when it came to making it. I feel like Neil Druckmann was like sat in a corner while Craig Mazin was coming up with all these stupid ideas for Season 2, especially with all the jokes, like changing Ellie's character, making Dina more of a main character than Ellie, and just what it really felt like was Craig Mazin making all of these changes, and then after all of these changes are made, then including something that was taken directly from the game. So like Dina and Ellie having the sex scene in the theater, and then going on their mission, and then Ellie beating up Nora. It really just felt so disconnected, like nothing actually made sense, and there was no threat. Ellie did not feel like a threat this season at all, and I've made a video on my TikTok talking about how Ellie was actually the main villain of The Last of Us Part 2, and I stand by that. I mean, there's no good person in the world of The Last of Us. There isn't a good person. There are just better people than others, but everyone's bad. And Ellie was the villain. Ellie was like the main villain of The Last of Us Part 2. Just becoming everything that Joel set out to not be. And that's what was so important about The Last of Us Part 2, about how revenge is not always the answer. And getting back on people is just not always the answer. Abby gave Ellie many chances in The Last of Us Part 2 to just let things go. You know, Ellie and Abby are very similar characters, almost identical as far as situations go. They're very, very, very similar. People only think that Abby's the main villain because she's new and not someone that we could have grown up with the first game. That's why people don't like Abby. But Abby and Ellie are very similar characters. And in The Last of Us Season 2, Abby felt like Ellie. I'm rooting for Abby. And that sucks to say in Season 2. What the hell is Ellie doing? She's not doing anything. Everything was so not memorable. In the game, we felt every single character that died by Ellie's hand. All of Abby's friends, it was a checklist. Ellie was going on these particular missions to take out her friends to get more information on where Abby is. It is terrible. It is a bad situation. That is evil. Even if they're terrible people, it's evil. Nothing about Ellie is bad in Season 2. There is so much crap to make us feel more for Ellie, and it fails. Because we automatically feel bad for Ellie in the game, even though she's doing all these bad things. But Season 2 completely gets rid of that whole entire idea because it's about testing what we're supposed to be feeling too. Like, are we supposed to be feeling bad for Ellie even though she's doing all of these terrible things? Is it right to hate Abby because of what she did? Or are we supposed to also feel for Abby because she is also in a very similar situation that Ellie is in? It just doesn't make sense to me why Season 2 decided to take away all that stuff. Now I understand season 3 is going to focus more on Abby's story, so maybe we'll see more of that side. But with how they handled Ellie's portion of the story for season 2, it was mind-boggling. Just how stupid the changes are, and how they decided to go about creating these characters. It makes absolutely zero sense to me, and it actually upsets me. It upsets me because The Last of Us Part 2 is great. It has a fantastic story and a really important story. And The Last of Us Season 2 decided to just be like, you know what? We don't want to do the same stuff over and over again. If the Last of Us show was handled with such care as the games were, it would be such a better show, because Neil Druckmann is in full control of the games, and he only makes the games if it makes sense. Season 2 shouldn't have been made because it did not make sense. They should have put way more time into it, and maybe even taken a few years off to really fine-tune it, to really have Bella Ramsey grow into the character rather than feeling like we're just jumping from season 1 to season 2, because there was that time difference from part 1 to part 2. There was a 7-year time jump. Well, not in the game, but 7 years from when we got part 1 to part 2. And you want to know what happened? The Last of Us Part 2 actually became a better game than the first The Last of Us. There, I said it. The Last of Us Part 2 is a better game than the first The Last of Us. Leaving nostalgia aside, The Last of Us Part 2 is a better game. I said it, and I'm not taking it back. Maybe I've just done a ton of yapping because I'm just trying to explain fully as to how I feel about about Season 2. But, y'all, I mean, I love The Last of Us Season 1. I think it's great. And I think they did a really good job adapting it. But then they decided, no, we're going to do something completely different. And why? Why would they do something so different that is just so opposite of what made the first game so special? I am hoping that Season 3 is great, and that when Season 3 comes out, it'll make more sense why they did what they did with Season 2. Because right now, Season 2 was one of the biggest disappointments that I've ever seen. It was a letdown. I would have let maybe 2 episodes slide if they were not that good, and then it got better. But every single episode, in my opinion, kind of every single episode got worse, except for episode 6. Episode 6 was fantastic, and the reason it was fantastic is because all of it was flashbacks, and it was just more development for Joel and Ellie's character. That episode should have come... I don't know if it should have come earlier within the season, but, you know, maybe that should have been the finale episode. Like, they should have ended it with the episode 6 being the start of Abby's story, and then episode 7 should have been like the prologue or epilogue, and just would have been the most emotional, gut-wrenching thing that we could have seen between Ellie and Joel. You know, I'm kind of rambling, but The Last of Us Season 2 was terrible. You know, if you loved it, I'm so happy. I'm very happy that you love it, because, you know, stories are subjective, shows are subjective, movies are subjective. If you loved it and I hate it, that's what it's all about. You're not supposed to dislike something just because someone else dislikes something. But I genuinely think that this was terrible. And I try to defend all video game adaptations as much as I possibly can, but Season 2 was dreadful, terrible, a awful adaptation of something that is so pure and beautiful. They completely destroyed it, and I hope that they can come back with Season 3, because what they did with Season 2 was so upsetting and just unforgivable. It was so bad. But yeah, that'll bring you to the end of today's video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of it. I appreciate every single one of you. But remember, your movie moment is right around the corner. See you in the next video.